Small tax errors can now land you with a fine or even worse in jail. This is due to new legislation, which is a list of minor offences for you to avoid. These include failure to alert SARS of changes in your personal details or failing to keep records from previous tax years. For more on this, we're joined by SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter. Very good morning to you, Edward Kieswetter. Tell us more about these changes. How's it going to work?
Good morning. I hope you're well, Fiona. So I think the first important point to note is that through these changes, SARS is merely regularizing a principle that is common in any other statute. In fact, prior to the 2011 Tax Administration Act, both the Income Tax Act as well as the VAT Act had these principles embedded in them. So I think that's important. This is not introducing something which is completely new. It is simply regularizing something which was an oversight in the 2011 Tax Administration Act formulation.
Quite an oversight. Sorry, carry on.
The second point is that, you know, many of the commentators, I guess with some degree of sensationalization as well, are projecting a scenario where the state would have a free-for-all against taxpayers. So I think the first important point is that the state must still prove blameworthiness. And blameworthiness needs to be proven beyond reasonable doubt. That's very important, that no taxpayer will be compromised in terms of their rights in law. Now, the two principles of blameworthiness, and I don't want to get too technical, because, you know, in common, simple parlance, the two principles, first of all, is one of negligence, where a person is affirmed not to have acted as a reasonable person ought to. And the second principle is the principle of intent. Now, if you take the equivalent of a traffic fine, when you have exceeded the speed limit, there's no need to prove that you had done so intentionally. You may have done so intentionally, or you may have done so negligently, as we often do. So, let me just jump in there, if I may. All right. So, you know, you'll be punished for an inadvertent mistake and negligence. I mean, isn't this unnecessarily punitive? If it is an inadvertent mistake, I mean, it's possibly something that you do not know about. I mean, something as small as not updating SARS on your change of address or change of status. Is it necessary to go that far? Well, I think what must be very clear is that it is an offence in law to not fulfill the tax obligations. Now, how far the state then seeks to go is a matter that has to be proven, as I said, based on blameworthiness. The tax and the burden of proof is on the state. If I go back to my traffic fine, because it's a very common situation that one may find oneself in, you could say that I had a medical emergency and I needed to get to hospital, and that's why I exceeded the speed limit, and that would then be taken into account. Similarly, you could say I was out of the country and therefore didn't have the means to submit my return. I really wanted to register. Here's the many times I tried to log onto your system. And so the taxpayer will always have the opportunity to demonstrate that they have done what could be reasonably done, and notwithstanding that, have failed to fulfill the obligation. Let me ask you what...
Okay, so we get it, the burden of proof, the onus is on us. That's good to hear. What sort of impact do you think this will have on goodwill? I mean, paying tax in this country is a problem. People feel that they pay tax. It doesn't go anywhere other than into the wrong people's pockets and doesn't fix the roads and put loos in schools. How is this going to help your case?
Before I go on to that question, I want to just make one more point that this, in any event, is not something that South Africa has invented. It's an international norm, and it is practiced by what we would consider to be internationally benchmarked organizations such as the Australian Tax Authority, the Canadian Tax Authority, New Zealand, just to name a few. To come to your point, I think one must be careful that we don't conflate these issues of the collection of tax as is a duty in law and how tax money is spent. Now, clearly, and I have been public to say that when taxpayers see the levels of corruption, when they see any level or example of wastage, they understandably would feel morally justified to fiddle or even in certain instances withhold their tax. That does not make it correct or acceptable in law, Fiona. Each of us have to do things that we may find unconscionable, and sometimes if we feel strongly enough about it in good conscience, we will resist it. But it doesn't make it correct. And so we are dealing with the legality thereof, not the morality thereof, or whether you feel that you can do so because you have moral justification to ignore it. So I must be careful that you don't. It would be equivalent for you to say that it is permissible to commit one crime or one offence because there are other offences or even other crime that is committed that you don't agree to.
Absolutely.
So
okay, let me ask you, sorry, Edward, we're running out of time. I want to ask you another quick question. Firstly, how much do you think you're going to be able to get once you've got this up and running? And secondly, NPA, I mean, we know that they're swamped with cases, and I'm just wondering what sort of capability SARS will have going forward to prosecute.
Well, we are building increasing our own capability. We have criminal investigation skills within SARS, and it is up to us to ensure that by the time we hand over a file to the prosecuting authority, that it is court ready. So there is an onus on us to do a lot of the work, and that's before we even get to the challenges within the NPA itself. But let me just end also by saying, Fiona, our proactive approach is based on three very important principles, and they are deliberately in this order. The first is to increasingly work hard to increase clarity and certainty and to help taxpayers understand the obligation so that they are not caught out unnecessarily. The second is that we want to make it increasingly easier and less complicated for them to fulfill those obligations. And then only thirdly, we build the capability to detect and to respond to non-compliance, whether that non-compliance is of a negligent or any other nature. The fact of the matter is every single one of us must honour the fact that this is a statutory obligation that we have to fulfill.
Okay, let's leave it there. Edward Kieswetter, very good to talk to you. Thank you.